Welcome to the Edifying Tales. In a quiet town where judgment comes faster than kindness, one woman's simple act of decency sparked a movement no one saw coming. When Ana Delgado served coffee to a stranger in leather, an outsider everyone feared, she had no idea her small cafe would soon become the center of an unforgettable transformation. What happens when an entire town is forced to rethink what it means to truly see someone? Stick around, you won't believe who shows up next. It had been a long summer for Ana Delgado, and the sticky heat of Clearview only made things heavier. Her hands were raw from wiping down counters at Sunrise Cafe, the small-town diner her family had owned for decades. Business was slow, slower than she'd ever seen it, and with bills piling up in her purse like unopened letters of doom, Ana couldn't help but wonder if the cafe, like so many other pieces of her life, was slipping away for good. She hadn't always lived in Clearview. Years ago, she had left for nursing school, built a life in the city, and carved out something of her own. But when her father suffered a massive stroke, she dropped everything to come home and run the cafe he loved. Now, every day was a battle to keep the doors open, especially since the factory in town cut its third shift. Customers had become rare, conversations in the cafe quieter, and hope, well, that was thinning out too. That afternoon, Ana was wiping down the counter for the third time in an hour, lost in thought, when the front door creaked open and the familiar bell chimed. She glanced up and froze. A man filled the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and time, he wore a leather jacket and boots heavy enough to make each step echo across the old linoleum floor. His beard was wild and gray, his arms covered in faded tattoos, but it was the patch on his vest that stopped the room cold. The Iron Guardians, a notorious motorcycle club whose reputation preceded them. Every customer in the cafe went silent. Forks paused mid-air, eyes widened. One elderly woman near the window clutched her handbag tightly. Even the radio stuttered into static, as if uncertain what to do. But Ana didn't flinch. The man sat at the far end of the counter, well away from the others, and waited. The waitress working the floor, a teenager named Megan, suddenly found the ketchup bottles incredibly fascinating and disappeared to the far corner. Ana's mind flashed back to something her father always said: everyone's money spends the same in this place. She nodded to herself, took a cloudy menu and a glass of ice water, and approached him with a practiced, steady smile. "Welcome to Sunrise Cafe," she said, her voice even. "Today's special is beef stew and cornbread, made fresh this morning." The man looked up. His eyes, pale blue and rimmed with fatigue, surprised her. They didn't belong to a dangerous outlaw. They belonged to someone hurting. "Coffee," he said softly. "Black. And whatever's quickest." "Been riding since before sunrise." Ana poured the coffee and noticed his hands. Huge, scarred, yet slightly trembling. Beneath the cuff of his sleeve, a hospital bracelet peeked out. And suddenly she recognized the look on his face. Not trouble, but sorrow. Deep sorrow. The kind that doesn't need words. "Long ride ahead?" she asked gently. The man hesitated. "I'm heading back to Riverside Hospital," he said finally. "My daughter, she's not doing well." What Ana didn't realize in that moment was that by offering him a cup of coffee and a little kindness, she had just changed her life and her entire town. Forever. Ana didn't expect trouble. She had simply offered kindness where others offered suspicion. But Clearview wasn't the kind of town to let things go unnoticed, especially when it came to people they didn't understand. The man, Jack Monroe, she would later learn, ate his eggs and toast quietly, grateful and polite. But as Ana refilled his coffee, the bell above the door jingled again. This time, it was Sheriff Hale and Deputy Connors, both in uniform and instantly alert. They spotted Jack's leather vest from across the room. Hale's eyes narrowed. Connors muttered something under his breath. They didn't sit in their usual booth. Instead, they walked straight to the counter and flanked Jack on either side, arms folded like they were preparing for a confrontation. Well, Hale said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Not often we get a visit from the Iron Guardians in Clearview. Just passing through, I hope?" Jack didn't raise his voice. "Just here for breakfast, Sheriff." Ana could feel the tension in the room thicken. Forks stopped clinking. Conversations went still. Even Megan peeked nervously from behind the soda machine. Then it got worse. "How about we see some ID?" Hale demanded. "You know, just in case you're one of the names we've got bulletins about." Jack reached slowly into his pocket, but the sheriff's hand twitched toward his holster. That was enough. He's a customer, Anna said sharply. Same as anyone else. Not just like anyone else, Hale replied with a smirk. His kind brings trouble. Drugs, fights, worse. Jack's jaw clenched, but he didn't rise to the bait. My daughter's in the hospital, he said quietly. I just needed a warm meal. Hale chuckled, clearly not buying it. That old excuse. That was the final straw. That's enough, Anna said, her voice firm and rising above the silence. He's done nothing wrong. You're not going to intimidate him in my diner. The room froze. No one spoke to the sheriff like that. You don't know who you're defending, Connors warned. I know exactly who I'm defending, Anna replied. A man who came in, ordered politely, and just wants to eat. That's all I need to know. Sheriff Hale's face darkened. You're making a mistake, Anna. People in this town remember things. Could hurt your business. Her voice didn't waver. Then, let them remember that I stood up for someone who deserved better. With a huff, the two officers left. The bell jingled again. This time, not cheerful, but sharp, like the end of a warning. Jack looked up, stunned. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, Anna said. Because sometimes doing the right thing means being the only one willing to stand up. What she didn't know was that her decision would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the entire town and save more than just her diner. The cafe stayed quiet after the officers left, but the mood had shifted. Conversations resumed in hushed tones, and customers avoided meeting Anna's eyes. Jack finished his food quickly, thanked her again, and placed a crisp $20 bill on the counter. For your father, he said simply. Anna tried to refuse, but Jack was already walking out the door. By evening, word had spread through Clearview like wildfire. Anna could feel it in the glances she got at the grocery store, in the silence from her regulars, and in the way even friendly faces seemed unsure of what to say. The next morning, when she arrived to open Sunrise Cafe, something taped to the front door stopped her in her tracks. A handwritten sign in red marker, closed until further notice. No biker lovers in Clearview. Her hands shook as she tore it down. Inside, nothing had been damaged, but the message was clear. Some people in town weren't just gossiping, they were retaliating. The usual breakfast rush never came. By noon, the cafe, once full of chatter and the smell of sizzling bacon, sat nearly empty. A few loyal customers came by, offering small smiles and quiet support. One older man, Dave Wallace, deliberately sat near the front window, where everyone could see him. Still the best coffee in town, he said loud enough for passers-by to hear, but it wasn't enough. Anna did the math in her head. Another week like this, and she wouldn't make rent. Worse, it felt like she was losing more than money. She was losing the heart of her cafe, her father's legacy, her community, and all for doing what she believed was right. Around 2:00 that afternoon, with the cafe almost completely empty, the bell above the door jingled again. Anna looked up, expecting another wary local, but instead, she saw two strangers. A tall man in his 50s wearing jeans and a leather jacket with a small Iron Guardians pin, and a woman with silver-streaked hair tied back in a neat braid. Anna Delgado? The man asked. She nodded cautiously. I'm Thomas Monroe, he said, extending his hand. Jack's brother. This is my wife, Sarah. Anna shook their hands, confused. Jack told us what happened yesterday, Sarah said. He would have come himself, but he's still at Riverside Hospital with Emily. That's his daughter. Anna's face softened. How is she? Thomas sighed. Stage 4 cancer. They're trying an experimental treatment. Last chance kind of thing. Anna's heart sank. I'm so sorry. He said you were kind, Sarah added. Said you stood up for him when no one else would. Anna shrugged, embarrassed. It wasn't a big deal. Yes, it was, Thomas replied. Most people wouldn't have done it, and from the looks of things, it's costing you. Anna didn't respond. The empty cafe said it all. Well, Sarah said, reaching into her purse, we came to say thank you, and to bring you a little help in our own way. Anna raised an eyebrow. What kind of help? Outside, the distant rumble of engines began to fill the air. At first, Anna thought it was just her imagination, the low hum in the distance, like thunder rolling in from the hills. But Thomas and Sarah exchanged a knowing look. They're here, Thomas said with a small smile. Anna stepped outside and froze. Motorcycles. Not just a few, but dozens. They came from both ends of Main Street. Riders in black leather, denim, and patches, filling the street, the sidewalk, and even the empty gravel lot next to the cafe. Some engines growled low, others rumbled like freight trains. People from nearby shops stepped outside. jaws dropping at the sight. By the time the roar finally quieted, over 200 bikers had arrived. Anna turned to Thomas, stunned. What? What is this? Jack made some calls last night, he explained. Told the Iron Guardians what you did. Word spreads fast in our community. Sarah nodded. 217 riders. Some came from 3 states away. They've been riding since dawn, and they're hungry. Before Anna could respond, the cafe bell jingled, and the first wave of bikers came through the door. Polite, respectful, grateful. They removed their helmets, greeted Anna with kind nods, and took seats at the counter, the booths, and every open space they could find. When space ran out, they stood, quietly waiting their turn. A large man with a white beard and a patch that read Riverside Chapter President stepped forward. You must be Anna, he said, holding out a calloused hand. I'm Big Joe. Jack's one of ours. Hope you don't mind us dropping in. Anna shook his hand automatically. I don't think I have enough food for all of you, she admitted. Joe laughed. Sarah called your suppliers this morning. Big delivery's already on the way. Don't worry about the cost. It's covered. Anna blinked, overwhelmed as she looked around. The cafe, nearly empty just an hour earlier, now buzzed with life and warmth. Orders flew in, coffee poured non-stop. Megan, the teenage waitress, rushed in after getting a call from Anna and immediately jumped into action. Another part-timer followed soon after. And the bikers? Every single one paid in cash and left generous tips. Anna pulled Big Joe aside. I don't understand. Why go through all this for me? Joe's expression turned serious. People see our patches and think they know who we are. They don't. What you did, standing up for Jack when no one else would, that matters to us. You gave him respect when others gave him suspicion. That kind of courage doesn't go unnoticed. Across the street, townsfolk watched in awe. Even Deputy Connors stood on the curb, radio in hand, eyes wide. Anna felt something shift deep in her chest, like hope returning. She had stood up for one man, and in return, an entire community she never expected had shown up to stand by her. And they weren't done yet. The hours that followed felt like something out of a dream. Sunrise Cafe, once nearly empty and echoing with silence, was now bursting with energy. Plates clattered, laughter filled the air, and the smell of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee drifted out onto Main Street. Even the townspeople who had been watching from across the road couldn't help but wander closer, curiosity outweighing caution. At first, they hovered near the door, hesitant. Then, something remarkable happened. One of the bikers, an older woman with long silver braids and a Texas chapter patch, noticed Mrs. Harlow, Clearview's retired librarian, lingering outside. She stepped out, introduced herself as Judy, and the two started talking about their shared love of quilting. Before long, Mrs. Harlow was seated at the counter, sipping tea and chatting like she belonged there. Then Dave Wallace, a Vietnam veteran and regular at the cafe, struck up a conversation with a biker who turned out to have served in the same unit, just years apart. They laughed, swapped stories, and shook hands like old friends. Even Principal Reynolds, known for his stiff collars and stricter tone, found himself deep in discussion with a biker who taught part-time at a community college. By sunset, the line between locals and outsiders had blurred into nothing. What had started as a quiet act of defiance was now a full-blown gathering. Someone rolled a portable grill into the alley and started cooking. Music played from the speakers of parked bikes. Kids from the neighborhood wandered in, eyes wide as they admired the chrome and paint jobs. One of the bikers even let a little boy sit on his bike for a photo. Anna stood near the register, stunned by it all. The cash drawer had been emptied twice already, tips were overflowing, and she hadn't stopped moving in hours. But for the first time in months, she wasn't exhausted, she was energized. And then, the bell above the door jingled one more time. Jack Monroe stood there, looking tired but lighter somehow, his eyes not quite as bloodshot as the day before. He stepped inside and paused, scanning the room filled with laughter, warmth, and an odd harmony of denim leather and small-town smiles. I hope you don't mind me bringing a few friends, he said with a half smile. Anna laughed, her tension breaking. I think I can squeeze them in. She pulled him aside briefly as Megan took his order. How's your daughter? Emily, right? Jack's face lit up for the first time. The treatment's working, he said, voice catching. Early signs, but it's the best news we've had in months. Without thinking, Anna hugged him. He returned it, grateful, genuine. She wants to meet you, he added as they pulled apart. Says you remind her of someone she looked up to. Strong, no nonsense, like her mom. Anna smiled. I'd like that. Outside, the motorcycles still rumbled. Inside, a community once divided was slowly learning to come together. One shared meal and one act of courage at a time. As dusk settled over Clearview, the soft orange glow of the streetlights mingled with the fading sunlight and the low rumble of motorcycle engines. The festival-like atmosphere at Sunrise Cafe hadn't faded. It had only deepened. For many in town, it was the first time in years they had stayed out past dinner just to be part of something. But the evening wasn't over yet. Near the back of the cafe, Big Joe, the Riverside chapter president, stood and raised a hand for quiet. The noise gradually died down. Forks paused mid-bite, conversations hushed, and even the children near the front window stopped playing with the stickers one biker had handed them. Joe's voice was low, but it carried. "I want to thank Ana Delgado," he began, "for her hospitality, and more importantly, for her courage." He looked around the room, his weathered face serious now. "Most people," he continued, "see the jackets, the patches, and they turn away. But not Ana. She stood up for one of ours when no one else would, and because of that, Sunrise Cafe is now under the protection of the Iron Guardians." There was a beat of silence. Then the cafe erupted in cheers and clapping. Joe raised a hand again. "Let me be clear. This place, it's sacred ground now. If anyone in this town has a problem with who Ana serves, they'll have to answer to all of us." His eyes drifted toward the back booth, where Deputy Connors had quietly taken a seat. He shrank into his corner as Joe locked eyes with him. "Are we clear?" Connors nodded quickly, swallowing hard. "Good," Joe said, smiling now. "Now, I hear Ana makes the best apple pie in 3 counties. Who's ready for dessert?" Laughter broke out again, and just like that, the tension that had briefly returned vanished into the air. Ana stood behind the counter, stunned and a little speechless. She wasn't used to speeches, let alone declarations of loyalty from leather-clad strangers who had just days earlier been considered outsiders. She glanced over at Jack, who gave her a quiet nod. Later that night, when the last biker had finally finished his coffee and the last slice of pie was served, the cafe slowly emptied. Promises were made to return. Some said once a month, others sooner. Ana locked the door and leaned against the counter, exhaling deeply. She looked at the register, overflowing with more tips and sales than she'd seen in weeks. But what moved her more than the money was the quiet shift she felt in the town itself. Clearview had been forced to look past appearances, and maybe, just maybe, it was better for it, because one woman had chosen to do what was right, not what was easy, and a town that had nearly turned its back on her had been given the chance to grow. The next morning, Ana Delgado arrived early at Sunrise Cafe, as she always did. The sun was just beginning to peek over the rooftops of Clearview, casting long shadows on the quiet street. Everything felt still, but not in the lonely way it had just days ago. As she reached the cafe door, she noticed something leaning against it. It was a package, carefully wrapped in brown paper and secured with a simple twine bow. A folded note was tucked under the string, written in rough but careful handwriting. "For the bravest diner owner we know, Emily's doing better. She still wants to meet you, Jack." Ana opened the package and gasped. Inside was a custom-made leather vest. Across the back, in bold stitching, were the words, "Sunrise Cafe, friend of the Guardians." She stood there on the front steps for a moment, overcome with emotion. Carefully, she brought it inside and hung it on the wall behind the counter, right next to her father's old apron. 2 symbols of service, strength, and quiet pride, side by side. That morning, the regulars returned. Slowly at first, then steadily. Dave Wallace and his wife sat by the window, as they always had. Mrs. Harlow brought in a tin of homemade cookies for Megan. Even Principal Reynolds stopped in for coffee and stayed longer than usual, chatting easily with a biker named Pete, who had decided to stick around a few more days. And then, like nothing had ever happened, Sheriff Hale walked in. He didn't swagger this time. No stern glances, no attitude. "Morning, Ana," he said quietly. "Coffee?" she offered, her tone kind but neutral. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am, please." She poured it just like she did for anyone else. Hot, fresh, and with a steady hand. Because as her father used to say, you judge people by how they act, not what they wear. And now more than ever, she understood what he meant. Later that night, Ana visited her father at the Clearview Care Center. Though the stroke had taken his speech, his eyes still told stories. She sat beside him, holding his hand. "I wish you could have seen it, Dad," she whispered. "I didn't know serving a cup of coffee would change so much. But I couldn't just look away. His fingers squeezed hers slightly. Or maybe she only imagined it. Either way, she smiled. Because what had begun as one small act of kindness had brought an entire community together. People who once saw only differences now saw connection, dignity, and shared humanity. Anna hadn't set out to be a hero. She just refused to let fear dictate her choices. And sometimes, all it takes to change a town is one person brave enough to serve coffee to a stranger when no one else will. Clearview never fully went back to the way it was. And that was a good thing. In the weeks that followed, Sunrise Cafe became more than just a breakfast stop. It became a symbol, a place where people came not just for the food, but for the feeling of something deeper, belonging. Locals who had once passed by in silence now brought their grandkids for pancakes. Travelers in leather jackets shared tables with retired teachers and factory workers. Conversations that once felt impossible now flowed like coffee being poured on a cold morning. The boundaries between us and them had blurred, and the town was better for it. Anna noticed it in the small things, how people made space for strangers, how eyes that once looked with judgment now looked with curiosity, how kindness had become contagious. One afternoon, she overheard a boy at the counter ask his grandfather, "Are bikers bad?" The older man paused, looked around the cafe filled with laughter and camaraderie, and said, "Some people wear leather, some wear uniforms, some wear aprons. You never know who the good ones are until you see how they treat others." Anna smiled quietly to herself. That was it, wasn't it? Later that evening, just before closing, she stood in front of the leather vest hanging behind the counter, friend of the guardians right beside her father's apron. She reached up and gently straightened them both, like she was tucking in old friends. The bell above the door jingled. It was Jack, this time with his daughter Emily. She looked tired but hopeful, her short hair just beginning to grow back, her smile quiet but radiant. "I wanted her to meet you," Jack said. Anna stepped from behind the counter and gave Emily a warm hug. "You've got your father's strength," she said. Emily smiled. "He told me you reminded him of my mom. I can see why." They sat and talked for an hour, not as strangers, not as symbols, but as people, connected through kindness, struggle, and the choice to stand up when it mattered. When they finally stood to leave, Emily turned to Anna and said, "You didn't just help my dad. You helped this whole town." After they left, Anna locked up for the night and stepped outside. The street was quiet again, but no longer empty. Clearview had changed, and so had she. She didn't plan on becoming the heart of something bigger than herself. But as her father always said, the world doesn't change through speeches, it changes through small moments. And the people brave enough to live them right. In the end, it wasn't about bikers, or badges, rumors, or reputations. It was about one woman, one cup of coffee, and a community reminded of what it means to truly see each other. In life, it's often the smallest acts of kindness that leave the deepest impact. Anna didn't change her town with a speech. She did it by standing up for someone others chose to ignore. For older adults, this story reminds us that wisdom isn't just in what we know, but in how we choose to act. Respect, dignity, and compassion never go out of style. Even in a world that feels divided, we still have the power to bring people together. One decision, one conversation, or one cup of coffee at a time. It's never too late to stand for what's right.